Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something darker than usual. This isn't just a campfire story. This is a true deep dive into the strange reality behind the place I worked. Wonderworld. Rain whispers against your window right now. The power hums low, maybe a little too low. You feel that chill. That's not the weather. That's the first breath of this story finding you. We're going to talk about the rules, 7 of them, that keep the dark things in and the staff, well, mostly safe. If you hear knocking behind you or feel something cold brush the back of your neck, you know the drill. Just ignore it and keep your eyes on the screen. Seriously, don't look back. So, before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you're brave enough to handle what's coming. Tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is. I want to know who else is awake for this. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe keep one candle burning. And let's begin tonight's haunting together. Section 1. The Whispered Contract. You step into the cold, cavernous lobby of the Wonderworld Administrative Building. The air smells like ozone and damp sawdust. A strange mix for an office. They call this place an amusement park, but it's more like a beautifully maintained antique trap. You're not here for the cotton candy or the Ferris wheel. You're here for the night shift, the work that happens when the neon lights flicker off. You know what's out there. You've known for a while, and the glossy contract sitting on the steel desk confirms your suspicions. It doesn't mention roller coasters. It mentions asset management and hostile environment protocols. The woman sliding the contract toward you, she's too calm, her eyes too flat for a job interview. She tells you that some people will try to humanize the creatures out there. They'll tell you they're just like us. Put them on our level. She pauses, leaning in over the dark mahogany, and her soft voice crackles like static in the silent room. Those people are wrong. The contract is a testament to this belief. It demands loyalty not to the company, but to the mission, securing the survival and supremacy of mankind. As your hand trembles near the signature line, you remember the first monster you ever hunted alone, the one that proved you were capable. You recall the raw, desperate feeling of realizing that putting a bullet in their head might be the easiest way out, but not the way they deserve. The fine print on the contract includes an astonishing waiver of all liability related to metaphysical or predatory incidents. You sign it anyway. You know you earned your place here. This job is a different kind of hunt, a sanctioned one, and that's why you're here. The creatures out there aren't human, no matter how much they look like us. They are snarling, vicious things that can never truly be trusted. They will feed on you the second it's convenient for them, smiling as they do it. This realization isn't scary anymore. It's just a cold, factual reminder of the world you've already been living in. You've seen their work, the misery they sow. You see the signature of the woman across the desk, Alara Vane, a new name for the pretty little thing named Michelle, you used as bait in the past. Now you're the one being brought into the light, or perhaps the deeper shadow. you remember that sense of overwhelming anger when dealing with their kind. That anger, that desire to inflict suffering beyond a quick death, that's what this place thrives on. The idea of leaving them with a quick bullet is appealing. But you know you'd rather see them get what's coming to them. It's a dark fascination that researchers still argue over whether the desire for vengeance is a primal defense mechanism or a learned social construct. You don't care about the science. You only care about the result. You wonder how many of the other brothers here were born into this kind of life, like some of the old Brethren Knights of St. Fontaine. Not you. You earned it. As you finish signing, the paper feels unnaturally warm against your palm, like a fresh wound. You step out of the office and into the dark heart of Wonderworld. It's late, maybe 2:00 a.m., and the park is silent, but not peaceful. The vast open spaces, the brightly colored rides, and the cartoon statues look sinister under the pale, high-pressure sodium lamps. You check your wrist, expecting a watch, but you feel the strange, cold weight of the newly issued ID bracelet. It's not just an access key, it's a tracking device, and maybe a kind of psychological anchor. The woman from the lobby, Alara, hands you a thin, laminated card. This is your immediate training material. Rule number 1 is written in bold, blood-red ink. Never approach the Sentinel Clock Tower between 01:00 a.m. and 04:00 a.m. And never, under any circumstances, allow your shadow to touch its base during that time. Alara explains in a calm, almost ASMR whisper that this rule is non-negotiable. The Sentinel Clock Tower is the oldest structure in the park, a focal point and a prison of sorts. It contains something they call a bound apex, an immensely powerful entity sealed there centuries ago by the original founders. She refers to the apex creatures collectively: the vampires, sirens, werewolves, and fae, the monsters, the lot of them. They are the so-called apex predators, feasting on us just because they can. You recall the feeling of dealing with a vampire by the name of Roberto. Back then, your favorite method was pulling out the teeth. It was a quicker process for vampires than it was for sirens. Less teeth, but it still hurt. You wonder what the apex confined in the tower would require, and the thought makes a shiver run down your spine. The dark core of this whole operation, the reason why you joined the Brotherhood, or as it's called now, the Brethren Knights of St. Fontaine, is the uncompromising belief in eradication. The founders renounced the church to continue their holy mission, realizing that, as they did God's work, they became increasingly aware of the devil's children roaming this world. They pledged themselves to the extermination of these monsters. Now, Alara tells you that the ancient folklore surrounding duppies, malevolent spirits from Caribbean lore, that are famously vulnerable if you spill salt or sand near their haunts, is eerily similar to how these modern apex creatures operate, relying on specific, often mundane weaknesses. The Sentinel Clock Tower is a massive, tangible weakness. Its shadow acts like a siphon. If your shadow touches it when the bound apex is at its weakest, your life energy becomes a fuel source, an offering. Alara says the easiest way to avoid this is to only use the service roads or take a massive detour. Your mind, already calculating, recognizes the trade-off. A longer, more dangerous route to avoid a known, immediate threat. That's the kind of choice this work forces on you. She also mentions that sometimes the clock will stop ticking at exactly 3:07 a.m. for no mechanical reason, a phenomenon known in the psychological world as a shared delusion of time slippage during periods of high stress or isolation. But you know better. That's when the bound apex is trying to lure you in. You feel a knot of excitement twist in your stomach. This is the challenge you craved. This isn't just killing. This is managing the darkness, navigating a system of ancient dread. You look up at the tower, its face obscured by the high fog. It looms over the park like a judgmental father. You're patrolling the perimeter of the enchanted forest section. The trees artificially dense, and the shadows thick enough to swallow a whole person. The heavy silence is broken only by the rhythmic, unsettling clack, clack, clack of a cooling pump somewhere deep in the mechanical bowels of a nearby ride. You're scanning the shrubbery when you nearly bump into an older man, the night gardener. He's gaunt, dressed in frayed overalls, and carrying a ridiculously long, tarnished scythe instead of pruning shears. He's been here for decades, he says. One of the few who still remembers the park before the founders officially took over. He's like an older version of the people who were born into the Brotherhood. He pulls you aside, his voice low and gritty, sounding like gravel rolling in an empty well. He tells you to be careful of the management, the Albrights and Bergmans of the world. He says they've got their own goals, and those goals aren't always about human supremacy. He remembers when the organization was a little more steadfast in its faith, but now it's less about God and more about man. He refers to the higher-ranking staff, the Brethren Knights, as being more akin to the Gilded Watchmen now. He warns you specifically about the apex guests, the permanent residents that the management keeps around. Sometimes, for centuries, these creatures are nothing more than animals, snarling, vicious things. The night gardener recounts an old local legend about the Wendigo, a starvation-induced monster from Algonquian folklore, whose defining trait is that the more it eats, the hungrier it becomes. He says the apex guests are the same. Their destruction of life tears a hole in the hearts of everyone who loved the victim, a hole that can never be filled. They end not just one life, but the lives of everyone connected to them, and the apex guests do it because they can. Hell, some probably do it because it's fun. The gardener mentions that the apex you'll see at Wonderworld are often the highly evolved, sophisticated ones, the pretentious, prissy vampires. He points to a patch of overgrown moss near the tunnel of love. He tells you a strange, eerie fact. In clinical psychological studies, subjects who are convinced they are interacting with a non-human entity, even if it's an actor, show a measurable spike in cortisol and a corresponding drop in empathy, effectively treating the entity as an object. He says that's what the Gilded Watchmen want, for you to dehumanize them completely. But he adds a cryptic warning. Some of them used to be, but they gave that up a long time ago, and there's no going back. He says you shouldn't confuse the target with the master. The targets are animals, but the masters, the ones who organize them and help them thrive, they are something else entirely. As an investigative mind, you catalog his words: suspicion of management, confirmation of the monstrous nature of the residents, and a clear distinction between the beasts and the organizers. He doesn't look like a fanatic, but he speaks of the management with thinly veiled contempt. He then sighs, adjusts his scythe, and reminds you that even if you choose the easy way out and kill them quickly, they still deserve so much worse. You suddenly recall the face of Roberto and the memory of taking a pair of pliers to his teeth, the blood on the tile. The gardener melts back into the shadows of the forest, leaving you alone with the chilling thought that you might be working for a new kind of monster. The next day, you receive your second rule via an encrypted message on your ID bracelet. It appears only as a blinking, internalized text you can read with a slight shift of focus. Rule number 2. Under no circumstances are you to make direct, sustained eye contact with any guest exhibiting a lack of reflection in glass surfaces. It sounds absurdly simple, yet immediately terrifying. This rule governs your interaction with what they call the shadow guests, the park's true vampires. The message details the rationale. Direct eye contact is perceived as an act of dominance and challenge. And for these specific creatures, it allows them to initiate a psychic link that can cripple your will, leaving you frozen in a state often mistaken for sleep paralysis. That terrifying, real-world state where your mind is awake, but your body is locked down. This paralysis is why many victims of night terrors often report seeing shadow figures looming over them. The shadow guests exploit this natural fear response. The message also emphasizes that while these creatures can look exactly like us, even beautiful and statuesque, they must be treated as nothing more than animals. Even if they smile and tell you they're domesticated, they'll turn on you instantly. You reflect on the time you used the girl, Michelle, as bait. She was a pretty little thing, and she brought the creeps in, and you dealt with them. Now you are both the hunter and potentially the bait. And the only thing protecting you is a subtle avoidance of mirrored surfaces and a downward glance. The message details a recent incident where a former colleague was found in the haunted mansion. Ride. He had made eye contact with a shadow guest and was found stripped naked and lashed to a cross. The shadow guest had gone to town on him with fists, His nose broke first, then his jaw. He was begging for them to let him go after about 20 minutes, and dead within the hour. A grim memory echoes in your mind. You had all sorts of nasty little methods for dealing with them, and you went to town on Roberto with your fists, too. The brutality you inflicted is what made you valuable. The investigative part of your mind clicks on. The lack of a reflection isn't a mere superstition. It's a verifiable, objective marker. It's a key difference that separates the apex predators from the mundane threats. As you walk through the park, you instinctively avoid the glass-fronted arcade games. You can't help but glance at your own reflection in a funhouse mirror. You know the dark, chilling fact that mirror neurons, the part of the brain responsible for empathy and imitation, fire differently when a person believes they are observing an aggressor, preparing the body for confrontation instead of connection. For the shadow guests, this lack of reflection is a visual cue that bypasses your brain's natural empathy, allowing you to view them purely as targets, as it. You realize the rules aren't just for their protection, they are for your psychological programming. Alara told you that talent like yours, the stomach for the dirty work, isn't present in everyone. The rules keep that talent focused. You continue your patrol, the weight of the second rule shifting your gaze constantly downward, making the world feel a little less real, a lot more hostile. Your task tonight is simple, yet sinister. Facilitate a controlled guest interaction in the Hall of Illusions exhibit. This is the Wonderworld term for the baiting game. Alara meets you near the staff entrance, her expression serene. She explains that a known, troublesome apex siren has been disrupting the park's operations. Her beautiful form and olive skin making her nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Sirens, you recall, have more teeth to pull out than vampires. The plan is to isolate her. Alara has prepared the bait. A young, attractive, recently hired park attendant named Julian. Julian knows nothing, believing this is a standard security drill. You feel a familiar coldness settle in your chest. This is exactly what you did with Michelle. Alara speaks with the same assured certainty Roy Bergman used to recruit you. She assures you that Julian's life is inconsequential when weighed against the need to trap and neutralize the siren. You think back to the internal conflict you had when Roy suggested bombing a nightclub and killing a lot of people to get to the Twin Queens. He had argued that the lives of a few drunk partygoers weren't of much consequence, and that it was an acceptable sacrifice. He made you look him in the eyes and agree that it was a hard choice, but necessary. This is the same logic, only on a smaller, more intimate scale. Your mission, ad hominem, is for humanity. Alara explains the key fact about sirens. They are drawn to intense emotional focus, particularly feelings of vanity and self-importance. Julian, a self-declared model, is the perfect lure, a walking ego. Your job is to position Julian inside the Hall of Illusions, trigger a specific, localized power outage. And then wait in the hidden maintenance tunnel for the siren to take the bait. You have a suppressed pistol ready. The setup is a dark callback to the hotel room where you waited for Roberto. You watch as Julian, oblivious and smiling, enters the Hall of Illusions, adjusting his hair in a darkened mirror. The siren is already tracking him. You can feel it. There's an odd fact about psychological conditioning. The Pygmalion effect shows that when you expect someone to fail, they usually do. Alara's constant, calm assertion that Julian is a simple, necessary sacrifice might be actively programming him for failure. You feel a brief flicker of distaste, but suppress it. The ultimate goal is simple: to guarantee the survival and supremacy of mankind against those who would seek to destroy us. Killing those who would kill us. That's the core. You focus on the task. You are the operational talent, effective even if your methods are cruder than some might like. You know that doing this work alone usually only ends one way, and you're grateful to be part of the brotherhood. You are preparing to do what is necessary. You initiate the power drop. The Hall of Illusions goes silent, save for the faint sound of Julian's nervous laughter. You draw your pistol. The air in the tunnel is suddenly thick with the scent of salt water and ozone. You feel the presence of the siren closing in, an old piece of folklore from Ireland. The myth of the banshee suggests that their scream is not a curse, but a warning of death. You realize the laughter you hear from Julian is not nervous. It's the precursor to a far worse sound. The laugh turns into a choked, wet gasp. The power outage worked perfectly. You move quickly out of the maintenance tunnel, your suppressed pistol leading the way. You find the siren dragging Julian down a narrow, mirrored service hallway behind the main exhibit. She's stunning, her muscles defined, a little beefier than you expected, like a statuesque figure. She's a formidable foe, like the Mia Darling of the old files. She's focused entirely on her prey. You take the shot, one round, aimed for the back of her leg to drop her. It connects, but the effect is negligible. She only stumbles, turning her head back with an expression of pure, predatory annoyance. She just looks annoyed, not the slightest bit intimidated. She speaks, her voice low and furious. "Hell of a way to introduce yourself," she snarls. She drops Julian and crosses the distance between you with blinding speed. You try to raise your gun to fire again, but you can't keep up. Before you can react, you feel a blow to your stomach, and you're lifted off the ground, then hurled back down with a sickening thud. Your vision swims. You catch a glimpse of Alara rushing in, followed by two security guards, Brian and Sean, now reimagined as Brother Gareth and Brother Silas. Gareth tries to fire, but the siren grabs his wrist, twisting his arm and sending him to the ground with a heavy thud. Silas, next, is simply grabbed by the uniform and hurled into the mirrored wall. You realize you let your anger and your memory of how easy Roberto was get the better of you. This is not a common vampire. This is an apex siren who has given up humanity a long time ago. You know, this is what happens when you let the anger guide you. You miss the essential detail. You watch, stunned, as she closes on Alara. You almost expect the violence to continue. But the siren simply stands over her, calm and unflinching. You should consider yourself fortunate, the siren says, her voice cold and calm. I'm much more forgiving than my sister is. This time you'll walk away. But provoke us again, and I won't be able to stay my sister's hand a second time. Alara stares at her, then quietly steps aside, letting the siren pass. The siren walks out without even looking back. The investigative part of you is already assessing the data. A non-lethal, targeted attack on the management. A deliberate warning. She was trying to deliver a message, not a death blow. You pull yourself up slowly, grabbing your pistol. You momentarily consider running after her and taking another shot, but you know that wouldn't end well for you. Gareth, tending to Sila's, asks, "What the hell was that?" Alara, composed, replies, "That was a warning." You realize an eerie fact about threat assessment. The human mind often finds an explicit, targeted threat less frightening than an abstract, unknown one, even when the explicit threat is more deadly. This is why the siren's measured warning is more psychologically devastating than a chaotic rampage would have been. You're left with the burning question. What is the plan B for creatures that won't go down with a bullet? You're called to the private executive lounge, a cold, minimalist space atop the clock tower, avoiding the shadow, of course. Alara meets you, and you realize the failed mission was a test, or at least the failure after the initial success of baiting the siren was the final assessment. Your cruder methods may have failed to kill the apex, but your sheer determination and refusal to quit impressed the founders. The night gardener's warning about the management echoes in your head, but the promise of strength in numbers is too compelling to ignore. You are introduced to Mr. Albright, a bald man in his 60s who carries himself with an importance that is hard not to admire. He is the Roy Bergman of this new reality. He pulls out a chair without asking and sits across from you, folding his hands neatly. He gets straight to the point. He is a fan of your work, particularly your projects before you joined. He knows all about Roberto. Talent like yours is not present in everyone, he says softly. He knows you're not looking to get saved. He's here because he wants you to be part of something bigger. He talks about the Brotherhood, the Brethren Knights of St. Fontaine, as an ancient organization. He says the calling is a dangerous one, and doing it alone only ends one way. But as part of a brotherhood of like-minded men, you can share the same common goals. He is trying to recruit you, confirming your suspicions. He's not here because you've got a pretty name. Albright believes you share a goal: supremacy. He justifies the existence of the apex creatures by referring to them as organized monsters, stating that they've done an admirable job of organizing themselves. He believes they are trying to take the world from us. Albright speaks of the legend of the golem, the creature of Jewish folklore created to protect the innocent. He sees the Brotherhood as a modernized golem, a necessary weapon. He then reveals an eerie but logical fact about group psychology. The bystander effect is virtually non-existent in tightly knit, highly trained groups like theirs. They don't freeze, they act, fueled by shared ideology. He sees this unity as the only way to combat the creatures that destroy life after life for centuries. You are listening closely, trying to figure out if he's for real. Albright confirms that he spoke with one of the leaders, Brother Gallon, about sponsoring you. This is your official trial. You ask him what's next. Albright smiles. Why don't we go for a ride? I'll tell you everything. You're ready. What did you have to lose? You follow Albright out of the executive tower and into a waiting black SUV. Gareth and Silas are already in the front seats. Albright tells you that since the siren proved so resilient, you'll need to seek out a countermeasure, a power strong enough to deal with the baptized creatures who are allegedly harder to kill. He drives you to a completely abandoned section of Wonderworld, a place filled with dead weeds and rusting metal. This place, he explains, is where the park's original supernatural containment failures occurred. He hands you a new, grimy, laminated card. Rule number 3. Do not board the Midnight Express after 03:30 a.m. and never carry silver across the tracks. The Midnight Express is an old, wooden dark ride, its facade covered in peeling paint. Albright reveals that this ride is structurally similar to the old European churches, where the Knights Templar used to store their most sacred, most cursed artifacts before the fall. This ride now contains one of the last remaining holy weapons, a shard of a shattered dagger that could kill something that standard bullets cannot. Your trial, he says, is to retrieve it. He admits they don't have a lot of records left of how the organization started. But he knows that the dagger, what they call the Saint Fontaine shard, is housed in the ride's final chamber. The silver restriction is a local folklore-based rule, a kind of psychological defense. It is widely believed in real-world history that the gree-gree, a voodoo amulet intended to protect the wearer, is often powerless if the wearer is carrying silver, as silver is seen as an object of commerce and corruption. Albright suggests that for the apex creatures, the presence of silver weakens the magic that keeps the shard hidden. You're instructed to bypass the automated sensors, retrieve the shard, and return before the 03:30 a.m. deadline, when the residual, ancient power of the place begins to stir. You ask why they don't simply bomb the place. Albright responds that holy weapons are rare and irreplaceable. They used to have a selection of daggers, but the last one was destroyed a few years back. You realize you're on a scavenging mission, searching for a desperate solution. You ask Albright if he knows where to get more of these holy weapons. He admits he doesn't know where to get some. Or rather, he claims he doesn't. The night Gardner's warnings resurface. Is this about protection or about control of resources? Albright's voice cuts through your skepticism. You and I have killed more than my fair share of vampires. We both know that they all go down the same way. But the siren proved that theory wrong. The eerie fact you recall is the psychological phenomenon known as weapon focus, where subjects, when faced with an immediate threat, tend to focus exclusively on their nearest weapon, neglecting situational awareness. Albright is counting on you to be so focused on retrieving the shard that you ignore the bigger picture. You nod, accepting the task. You are going for a ride. Before you can tackle the Midnight Express, Albright insists on a private briefing back in the executive lounge. It's just you and him. The room is quiet, the hum of the ventilation the only sound. He gets philosophical, referencing the hard choices that need to be made. He leans forward, his hands steepled, and discusses the park's true mission. He explains that while the original Brotherhood was religious, today it's less about God and more about man. He defines your existence as a simple matter of numbers. He argues that the collateral damage of a few is justified when it removes a threat that will kill exponentially more people over centuries. You had argued that you thought you were doing this to save people, not kill more. He concedes it's a hard choice, urging you to look him in the eyes. You do, and you're still not entirely sure about what you see. He says the Apex are using the innocent guests as a shield, counting on you to be too weak to exploit it. It's your duty to prove them wrong. He uses a historical reference, the Siege of Masada, where ancient Jewish rebels committed mass suicide rather than surrender to Roman forces. It was a choice of absolute necessity, and Albright frames your work in the same light. Everything you do must be absolutely necessary. He tells you that your failure with the siren was a result of fighting fair, of treating her like a manageable problem instead of an existential threat. You caught yourself frowning a little, but you supposed he had a point. The eerie fact he shares next is chilling. Research on high-level sociopaths shows a complete cognitive decoupling of moral judgment and utilitarian action. They can logically determine the greater good without any emotional cost. Albright exhibits this perfectly. His rationale for sacrificing innocent lives being cold, mathematical, and utterly sincere. He is trying to program you into the same mode of thought. He then opens a folder and reveals your true trial, the biggest job the Brotherhood has ever considered. He says you're more experienced than the average recruit. He calls them the Twin Queens. These sisters, Mia and Leah Darling, are the ones who have been organizing the Apex on the West Coast, helping them survive and thrive. Kill them, and you destabilize the entire region, sending the undead bastards running into the shadows. The folder contains photographs of two women, both blonde with olive skin and green eyes. They look almost like goddesses, don't look like much, you murmur. Albright assures you that intel says otherwise. They are baptized, blessed by a power that makes them incredibly hard to kill. He wants to send these bastards a message. Their time is over. He tells you that despite your failure earlier, you did well. He then gives you his final word of confidence, his voice softening just a touch. Ad hominem lucas, for humanity. He stands up, tired but resolute. You nod, accepting the colossal challenge. You spend the next few days in a quiet, focused preparation, retrieving the Saint Fontaine shard from the Midnight Express ride. The retrieval was tense, but successful, and you now possess a weapon that might be effective against the Twin Queens. Your focus is now entirely on Mia and Leah Darling, the monarchs of the Apex world. You reflect on the file. Mia, the one you encountered, the siren, was beefier and more muscular. Leah, the other sister, is described as a scrawny little thing, but she is the one who rarely leaves their penthouse, only attending the odd social event. Albright's intel suggests Mia has a predictable routine: gym on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and nightclubs on the weekends. You suggest capturing Mia and using her as bait to lure out Leah, the more isolated one. Albright immediately sees the value in emotionally compromising the other one, making her less rational. You chuckle, all the more reason to do it. Albright tells you that he's arranged for a high-profile party at the Ivory nightclub in 2 days, an event Leah is expected to attend. This is your chance. The investigative focus shifts from brute force to strategy. Leah is known to be choosy about who she meets with. Her movements are less about hunting and more about maintenance of power. Albright has already reached out to his connections to set something up, a disruptive package that could destroy both of them if your direct confrontation fails again. This package is the final, desperate escalation. You find yourself looking forward to the challenge. Albright refers to the Darling name being associated with luxury fashion brands, reminding you of their high and mighty status. The idea of putting one of those moguls in their place appeals to your darker instincts. You recall a piece of Scandinavian folklore about the Draugr, an undead creature often obsessed with its wealth and status in life. The twins' fixation on high-profile events and expensive venues fits this pattern perfectly. An eerie but plausible fact surfaces in your training memories. Prestige bias is a known vulnerability in human behavior. We are psychologically inclined to trust and obey figures associated with wealth and power, making the twins' socialite existence the perfect camouflage. Albright confirms that the package will be delivered tomorrow, and you must find a place for it near the twins where it won't attract attention. He smiles a cold smile, ready for the plan to go off. You know that if this works, you'll officially earn your place among their ranks. The day of the party, Albright wordlessly hands you a briefcase, one you've never seen before, and you know exactly what's in it. You are walking into the Ivory nightclub, the intention of either capturing one queen or detonating the other. You enter the Ivory nightclub. It's an upscale place, crowded and loud, a perfect hunting ground for apex predators. You scan the room, looking for the twins. It doesn't take long to find them. Leah and Mia Darling sit together at a booth near the back. They look serene, completely at ease, yet somehow radiating a silent, dangerous authority. You spot an empty booth beside them, the perfect spot for the package. As you move through the crowd, you receive the latest directive, another emergency update on your ID bracelet. Rule number 4, under no circumstances are you to engage in flash photography or use sudden, high-intensity light sources near the twin queens. Albright explains that this rule is specific to the baptized, apex, while standard vampires are weakened by sunlight. The twins are fortified by their infernal power. However, sudden, non-natural bursts of light, like a camera flash, can momentarily disrupt the complex energy shield they use for their rapid healing. This is your window for the Saint Fontaine shard. The eerie fact you recall is the real-world superstition about the evil eye, which is often warded off with reflective surfaces or specific hand gestures. The queens seem to have inverted this concept, using the sudden flash to momentarily blind the infernal power that protects them. You make it to the booth, setting the briefcase discreetly under the table and kicking it back out of sight. You feel a profound sense of resignation. A lot of these folks are about to die, and none of them will understand why. But it's just as Albright said, a matter of numbers. The only way to guarantee the survival of mankind is through the eradication of their kind. You stand up, preparing to leave and activate the package remotely, when Mia looks directly at you. She doesn't look angry. She has a look of resignation, mixed with a flash of frustration. Leah, the scrawnier sister, is different. Her fingers are steepled, her legs casually crossed. You can't figure out the look on her face. You realize, even in the moment, that she is laughing at you. You see the smile, and you hear the voice of the siren, warning you that her sister is less forgiving. You move quickly toward the exit. The only ones who seem to be watching you are the twins. You wonder if they can sense the proximity of the package, the threat of the explosion, the risk to the very mortals they claim to rule over. An old piece of folklore from Russia, the tale of the Kashe, the Deathless, suggests that his soul, his vulnerability, is hidden inside a specific object. The flash of light and the shard are your attempts to find the twins' hidden soul. You step through the door, and into the cool night air. You reach the street, hearing the muffled pulse of the music behind you. You know that, within minutes, the only sound will be the blast. You're a few blocks away when the bomb goes off, not with a massive, cinematic explosion, but a heavy, muffled thump that shakes the pavement beneath your feet. You feel a perverse sense of relief when you hear the initial news reports. 12 dead. It's a lot less than you expected. The bomb should have killed more people, given the location. You realize the less needless blood on your hands, the better. Albright calls you soon after, ecstatic. You've earned your place. You're knighted as a member of the Brotherhood that very day. You figure that's the end of it, but you should have known better. 3 days later, on what should be your last day in the city, you're at the hotel bar, trying to relax. You hadn't seen Albright, Gareth, or Silas that day. They had their own messes to clean up. You are minding your own damn business. She moves without making a sound. It's not until she speaks from the seat beside you that you realize she is even there. Mia Darling, the siren, sits next to you. She doesn't have a scratch on her. Her skin is perfect. She looks jaded, watching you from the corner of her eye. I warned you, you know, she says softly. I told you. She's not as forgiving as I am. But you didn't listen, did you? You try to deny it, stammering that she must be dead. She chuckles, a cold sound. Sorry to disappoint you, she says, turning her head to look at you. But I don't die like other vampires. She is the unkillable guest, the one Albright spoke of. The eerie, undeniable fact is that you saw her body reconstruct itself after you shot her in the head. The chunk torn out of her skull bendied itself back together. Your fear is cold and rational. You realize an old truth, the reason that holy water and crucifixes are effective in folklore is less about divine power and more about the conviction of the wielder. Your attack failed because your conviction was split by the collateral damage and your own moral compromises. You think about reaching for your gun, but you know a bullet won't work. The Saint Fontaine shard is back in your hotel room. Mia stands up, gesturing for you to follow. Let's go for a ride, Lucas, she says. She wants to show you something. You follow, realizing that she didn't come to kill you. She came to deliver you. The horror isn't the threat of death. It's the certainty of what you are about to see. You sit in Mia's car as she drives in silence. You try to talk to her, but she refuses to respond. You are being delivered to the true mastermind, the sister who is less forgiving. She drives out towards the coast, away from the city lights. Finally, she stops the car in the middle of a deserted stretch of highway. She turns to you. You ask, so, this where you gonna do it? Mia assures you that she won't kill you, but the outcome depends on how you speak to Leah. She explains that she put in a word for you, a last kindness. You realize she is offering you a chance to witness the consequences, a kind of dark mercy. She is the more diplomatic of the two. You murmur, how generous of you. She bids you a curt farewell, hoping this is the last time you see each other. As you step out of the car, you see it. Lined up on the beach are about 15 crude wooden crucifixes. Each one carries the body of a man. Beneath them stands Leah Darling, her hands behind her back, waiting. She is the scrawny one, yet she looks like a goddess in the golden light of the setting sun. Your voice cracks as you ask, "What did you do?" You look up at the crucified men. You recognize Albright, stripped naked and lashed to a cross near the middle. Next to him are Gareth and Silas. You recognize other men, the very ones who had knighted you just a few days before. The management you served has become the ultimate acceptable sacrifice. Leah croons, "Ah, the new recruit. So you finally come to join your new brothers." She says that if it were up to her, she would have hunted the entire organization down. But her sister believes in diplomacy. This, she says, is her diplomatic solution. The sickening fact you realize is that the collateral damage you accepted for the bombing, the 12 innocent lives, is dwarfed by the strategic, targeted slaughter of your own organization. Albright had taught you the language of utilitarian sacrifice. Leah has simply turned that logic back on the organization, using the members of the Brotherhood as the sacrificial lambs. The irony is agonizing. You had seen firsthand the suffering caused by the death they leave in their wake. Now, you are a witness to the misery they sow in the lives of their victims. This is the ultimate lesson in brutality. Leah extends her arms, standing before the row of crosses, and issues her final decree. "Witness my generosity firsthand," she commands. "Mercy is a gift I only ever grant once. Next time, this ocean will run red for generations with the blood of your brothers. That I promise you." You stand frozen, staring at the corpses of Albright and the others. You know she hadn't brought you here to save them. She brought you here to taunt you. You look into her eyes, and you know these are not empty threats. These are promises she means to keep. Leah approaches you, close enough that you can smell her perfume. "Do you understand?" she asks, her voice low and cold. You can't speak. All you can do is weakly nod. "Good. Then this is farewell. Make sure it's permanent." She brushes past you, heading to Mia's car. The twins are long gone. You are left alone with the macabre display. Your mind, seeking refuge and structure in the face of this overwhelming trauma, races back to the rules. You realize your new rule number 5, has been etched into your mind by this experience. Never assume the apex is unaware of your organizational structure, and never trust a founder's definition of acceptable sacrifice. This rule is the hard-won knowledge of the organization's vulnerability. You look at the crosses and recognize the historical truth of the Inquisition's eventual failure. When an organization becomes too focused on internal purity and grand, symbolic gestures, it ignores external, calculated threats. The founders fell because they believed their mission and methods were sacrosanct. You remember the old belief in the mandatory reciprocation hypothesis in psychology, the human need to return a favor or a slight. Leah has just repaid the bombing with the annihilation of your leadership. You know you have to run. You find the SUV where Albright left you and drive back to Wonderworld, back to the only place that offers sanctuary, however false. You know you've done all you can to further the Brotherhood's mission in the years since you encountered the darling twins. Your belief in what you stand for hasn't wavered. You've seen firsthand the horrible depths of their brutality up close, and you hate them all the more for it. But you are not ready to face them again. Not until you know for sure you can win. The image of Albright on the cross is a constant, cold reminder. The memory of the coast is a scar you carry back to the park. Albright's death, Gareth's silence, Silas's broken neck are the cost of your promotion. You return to the administrative building, now eerily quiet. The few surviving members of the Brotherhood, mostly lower-level security, stare at you. You are the sole operational survivor of the Founder's final gambit. You realize the entire recruitment drive, the grand mission, the Twin Queens. It was all a gilded trap. They weren't trying to destabilize the West Coast apex. They were trying to eliminate a rival power structure that had grown too influential within the park itself. The night gardener's warning comes back in a cold rush. Don't confuse the target with the master. The Darlings were the target of the old guard Albright, but in surviving, they became your new master, dictating the terms of engagement. Rule number 6 materializes in your internal consciousness, a direct result of Leah's diplomatic solution. Always maintain a non-confrontational surveillance perimeter around the Sentinel Clock Tower and document all uncharacteristic power fluctuations. This is their new center of operations. You've made sure the remaining Brotherhood members have heeded their warning. The organization is now decentralized, operating purely in the shadows, focusing on smaller, manageable threats. You are the acting leader, forced into the role by the brutality of the twins. You've had to make compromises, and you admit some of what you've done ain't much to be proud of. But every single choice was necessary. You know you'll come back for those twins one of these days, but not until you know for sure you can do it. The investigative angle now centers on Leah's power. Mia had brute force and healing. Leah, the scrawny one, had organizational power, an iron will, and a diplomatic vision. You recall an old, eerie fact from military psychology. During periods of extreme attrition, survivors often experience moral injury, a trauma resulting from witnessing or committing acts that violate deeply held moral beliefs. You've been carrying that trauma since the bombing, and the crucified men cemented it. You realize that your rule number 7, the final, most difficult rule, is purely psychological. Never allow yourself to believe they are monsters. They are simply people who gave up humanity a long time ago, and you must never, ever allow yourself to become one of them. Leah gave you a choice. Farewell. Make sure it's permanent. Your permanent farewell is not from the twins, but from the easy moral clarity you once had. You step onto your night patrol, your Saint Fontaine shard tucked safely away. The park lights are still on, but the colors feel dead. You hear the faint, haunting sound of a music box coming from the clock tower. It's 3:07 a.m. The clock has stopped. You feel the cold air of the park slowly recede, replaced by the familiar warmth of your own room. The narrative breaks, and the adrenaline begins to drain away, leaving a lingering, hollow ache in your chest. That was a lot to take in, wasn't it? The quiet of your space is a welcome shield after the noise, and the dread of Wonderworld let the fear dissolve like mist at dawn. You're safe now. The only shadows in your room are the ones you know. I hope that even as the story unfolded, you felt a little thrill, a little understanding of what it means to face the necessary darkness. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into the rules of the Midnight Express and the terror of the Twin Queens. If the lingering images are too much, take a slow, deep breath and exhale the tension. Focus on the feeling of your blanket, the steady light of your screen. The hunt is over for tonight. Sleep peacefully if you can, or for tonight. Sleep peacefully if you can.